Hi, I'm Jason Hommel, author of The Copper Revolution and admin of the Facebook group, The Copper Revolution. I want to talk today about why I think copper is the greatest health discovery of probably the last 150 years or maybe ever. I just took a niacin, I just took a copper and all my B vitamins, and I am beginning to niacin flush. I usually take the non-flushing form of niacin, the niacinamide, so this is going to be an experience. I have a feeling that when you niacin flush, it also brings blood not just to the surface of the skin, but the internal skin. So the epithelial layers of the internal organs, including the brain. I've always wanted to do a video while I was niacin flushing. Because sometimes I get really good insights when that happens. So hopefully that will happen today. My ears are beginning to get a little red, so that's fun. I might be crawling out of my skin, but that'll be fun too. Okay, so why is copper so important? And let's just get right to it. The government has an opinion. They call these opinions the RDA and the tolerable upper limit for copper, which are the RDA they say is 0.9 milligrams and the upper limit is 10 milligrams. These are facts that you would learn if you were a med student perhaps, or if you were a student trying to get a credential. You'd have to memorize these facts and regurgitate them. While it is a fact that those are their opinions, these are more opinions than they are facts. And it's perfectly valid for me to have my own opinion that we need more copper. And I think my opinion is far more valid than their opinions. And I'll get into that in a minute. But my opinion is that everybody should be starting at about 5 milligrams of copper, broken up so that you don't get nausea, so you don't vomit. And that we really ought to work up to about 10 milligrams of copper a day, up to 100 milligrams of copper a day. Right now, I have taken, I started my day with 2 cups of coffee with 15 milligrams each, and I had a glass of milk with another 15, so I'm on about 45 milligrams of copper, and I did topical copper everywhere for another 70 milligrams. So I'm just over 100 milligrams, but topical, I believe, counts at about half. Okay, so that's how much I'm taking. Now, why did the government establish an RDA of 0.9 milligrams, and how do they do that? They actually have a book that's referenced by just about everybody who writes articles on copper. It's like a 400-page book, a reference guide for all their micronutrients. And in there, they showcase a study where they gave, first they tried to determine how much copper was excreted in a day by people who weren't getting any copper at all. And they theorized that if they replaced that copper, that people would be sufficient. And what they were doing was trying to comply with a court order to make sure that prisoners were getting enough nutrients that they wouldn't suffer massive copper deprivation. Okay, so the RDA shouldn't be called an RDA. It shouldn't be called a recommended daily allowance. It should be called this is the number we're inventing to comply with court orders to make sure that prisoners don't have massive copper deficiency. That's what that number really is. And so what they first did was they measured excretion rates in women who weren't getting any copper at all. So they zero copper in their diets. And they didn't measure all the excretion. They only measured perhaps the feces and the urine. And they measured 0.58 amount of milligrams of copper per day being excreted. They really should have also measured the sweat, because we can lose 1 milligram of copper per day if we're sweating heavily, which I might start to do with this niacin flush. And so then they gave these women 0.58 milligrams of copper, thinking it would replenish what was lost. And 8 out of 10 of the women developed severe copper deficiency problems. And so they realized they couldn't use that amount. So then they arbitrarily, inventively, decided to bump up the amount to 0.7. And then they arbitrarily decided to bump up the amount again to 0.9 with no further studies to determine if that was a sufficient amount or whether people could recover from copper deficiency. I mean, there was no study around that to determine that that's what people should have. So it's purely inventive, and there's no data backing that number is valid for anything, for anybody. It's not like they gave a wide range of copper to different groups of people and determined that the people with the best health outcomes were the group that got 0.9. None of that was done. This was done back in 1993. They've never updated their data since then. Well, they came out with another They came out with another report in 2003, but it's even worse data. They hid the data that I'm just telling you about how they determine the amount. So it's complete nonsense. And then as far as the upper limit goes, they just pretty much looked at what they thought was copper toxicity at various other incidences and then said, well, 10 is probably safe. They just invented a number. So they basically established nothing, and it should not be quoted as if God came down and said it. People put far too much faith in government, and they never look to the sources. So why do I think we should all have 10 or up to 100? Because I've experimented on myself, and I feel better at larger amounts. But also the research indicates that we could take a lot more. Real toxic amounts start at about 20,000 milligrams. So when does that happen? About one person per year in India will get a hold of a bag of copper sulfate and put about 12 teaspoons into a glass of water and consume it and try to commit suicide, and that's about 20,000 milligrams. It's about equal to the lethal dose of table salt, which again is also 12 teaspoons. Only 15% of them die. And of those who do die, it could very well be that most of them are dying due to hospital interventions, such as taking chelating agents, which can be hard on the liver or the kidneys, or they die from their stomachs being pumped. So it's not even proof that that is a level of lethal amounts of copper. Some people have survived 100 and even 200,000 milligrams of copper in single doses. Those people sometimes suffer liver damage. You almost never hear about the amounts. They will always say too much copper can kill you without telling you the amounts because they're probably trying to deceive us all. Those really large amounts kind of go to show how safe copper is. Olivares did a study, and he gave people 10 to 20 milligrams of copper over a couple of months, and nobody developed liver damage at all. One of the things the government says about the 10 milligrams limit is they said that's the limit at which there's no liver damage. But they've never done any study to determine at what levels some liver damage would take place. There are only these anecdotes of 20,000 to 200,000 milligrams. So none of it is really valid. They've done, no study at 30 or 40 or 50 milligrams to determine if that's hard on the body at all. They do quote one study of a guy who took 30 milligrams of copper for a few years, and then he took 60 milligrams of copper, and then after 3 years, he needed a new liver, and they really provided, and then he died, and then they provide no further information about this one guy. Well, I have now been taking 30 milligrams of copper for 5 years. I've cured numerous health conditions. I've cured myself from full body arthritis. Copper's gotten me a lot smarter. I've written a 500-page book. I never thought I would do that. I only wrote short articles before. My wife has healed from numerous health conditions on our high copper. She healed from heavy periods. She healed from Hashimoto's, thyroid, low thyroid issues, hypothyroidism. My testimonial in my book goes on for about 10 pages, the things that I've healed from. One of them was excessive sweating induced by niacin, which can lead to low copper. Low copper can lead to excessive sweating. I kind of have had an excessive sweating problem my whole life. Copper seems to mitigate that quite a bit. If I don't do topical copper for a few days, the sweating seems to come back. I'm pausing here for a minute. Let's see. So the guy who died from taking high copper, the study indicates, or the study's title is included the word causation, that copper caused a man to die. But you can't determine causation from a case study. The medical establishment says this over and over again, so therefore that even the headline of that study is a lie. There has never been anybody else who's duplicated that situation, so And it only happened in 1993, the very year they needed to sort of warn about excessive copper for their little study. So it was kind of convenient that it's never happened again. And the government also said that they should really do studies on levels above 10 milligrams to determine the level at which copper could be harmful. And they've never done such studies in the last 30 years now, which is also highly suspect, right? Well, Olivares did a study. He showed that 20 milligrams was safe. So there's that. Most of the studies the government goes to say that copper causes liver damage are really done on animals, and the amounts involved are usually 5 to 10,000 milligrams per day over quite a few months, which is far more copper than you would get in the single doses of 20,000 milligrams that might have shown harm in a few people in India. So once again, all of those studies go to show how incredibly safe copper is. And in all of those studies where they literally give enough copper to kill the animals almost never get cancer, which is interesting. People wonder if copper causes cancer. There's a big debate about that, but really copper almost never causes cancer. Copper has quite a few properties in it that would heal cancer. First of all, copper detoxes very well with zinc, creating metallothioneins and superoxide dismutase. And those help to detoxify a wide array of toxins, hundreds of toxins really. And we all know that carcinogens are responsible for cancer, and carcinogens are toxins. So when copper and zinc are detoxing carcinogens, then therefore copper has anti-cancer properties. The other thing is cancer is said to be a metabolic disease, and copper speeds the metabolism because it helps us make ATP. So if we're all getting more energy on copper, then clearly that is going to help heal cancer. Copper, zinc, and vitamin C are each needed to make collagen, and so therefore they speed wound healing. Speed healing. So if you're taking something that's helping you speed healing, of course that also is going to help us heal from disease as well. Copper used to be historically applied on big open wounds because it stops bleeding, stops bruising, so that's good too. Copper detoxes lead, mercury, and cadmium through the metallothioneins, and just about everything else through the superoxide dismutase, which is a big, very powerful antioxidant. Ceruloplasmin also detoxes everything. Albumin detoxes everything. Glutathione detoxes everything. All these are made with copper. So how is it that copper is a wonderful detoxer? And if it is a detoxer, how can it be a toxin? The studies have shown really that in humans, right around 10 milligrams for about a month, if people get 10 milligrams of copper for a month, they end up excreting almost all the copper that they take in, going to show that it's not harmful. And if we're excreting all the copper we're taking in, of course, if copper is binding to other things through all of the enzymes that copper is made into or made with, then copper is a wonderful, perfect detox agent. And that's how it works in the body. My ears are getting really flush now. So detoxifying. But copper is also needed to build things. Like we need copper and zinc and vitamin C just for collagen formation. And if we're going to heal things, we need collagen formation. Collagen is made everywhere in the body. Women most often think about it as just filling wrinkles in their face. But really, the bones are more collagen than calcium. Bones are 35% collagen. Muscles are 30% collagen. So, most of our body is made up of bone and muscle everywhere. For the strength of our internal organs, so that we don't get hernias or hemorrhoids, and so that our blood vessels are strong, we all need collagen. For the strong cell walls in the nerves, we need collagen. For our eyeballs, we need collagen. For everything, just everything. The joints in the spine and the knees and the cartilage is mostly collagen. So we literally need collagen for everywhere, and we need those three in an appropriate balance. Almost everybody gets the balance wrong because almost everybody thinks copper is toxic. So the historic amounts suggested are, 15 times the amount of zinc to copper, and that balance really causes copper deficiency. One of the primary causes of primary copper deficiency is simply overusing dental cream that's high in zinc. That alone will cause nerve damage and copper deficiency. So we need enough copper to balance. And I think a far more appropriate ratio from my own experimentation, from experimentation of thousands of people in our group, is right around 2 to 1, so twice as much zinc as copper. So I take anywhere between 50 to 75 milligrams of zinc, sometimes up to 100 if I have some allergies, like in the spring. I'll take a little bit more zinc. So, the range is really a ratio between 1 to 1, maybe 2 to 1 zinc over copper. That I think is ideal. You can go up to 3 or 4 times as much zinc as copper, and it's still within range. We just recommend that people take enough zinc to fix zinc deficiency symptoms. That's also why I'm taking copper. Why am I taking 30 milligrams? Because I feel better on 30 milligrams compared to 20 milligrams or 10. I'm a big man. I exercise. I probably need more copper because I wear my body out. I probably need more copper because I take high iodine. The high iodine protocol might flush out extra copper. I take MSM sulfur, which might also flush out extra copper. I sweat a lot. I might lose copper that way. So I just feel better on 30 milligrams, and I've seen the same thing time and time and again on our forum. People, they struggle at 5 milligrams. They're not fully detoxing yet. They're getting detoxification symptoms, but it's not enough really to overpower the toxins within the body. The average person has 2,600 milligrams of fluoride in the body. How are we going to detox that with copper when we need twice as much copper just to bind to the fluoride to excrete it? So we really need like 5,000 milligrams of copper. How are you going to get that at 5 milligrams a day? It's going to take years. So that's why if you're taking 100 milligrams a day, well, 100 times, say, 50 days, a month and a half, you'll mostly get through fluoride detox in about a month and a half. So people who scale up their copper, they get through detox a lot faster, and then they start feeling a lot better. Their energy levels go up. Sometimes people, after about 3 weeks to 6 weeks on copper, their energy levels crash. I felt so good at the beginning. What happened? Well, to make energy in the body, we need not just copper, but also magnesium and the B vitamins. So it's time to add the magnesium and the B vitamins if you need them for energy. I wonder how much magnesium I really need, though, because copper does help us hold on to magnesium and salt, which is very interesting. And boron, also on our protocol, also helps us to hold on to magnesium and calcium. So if I'm taking two things, boron and copper, which both hold on to magnesium, then the reality is I'm not suffering from magnesium wasting like a lot of people are. The health industry seems to suggest that everybody needs to take as much magnesium as possible because it just runs right through you, and everybody's suffering from magnesium wasting. But that doesn't happen with copper and boron, so I've gotten away with taking almost no magnesium in the last year. Every now and then I'll have a little magnesium just to test or see. Doesn't seem to bother me if I do. Doesn't seem to help if I do or don't. So I usually don't take it. What's next? Because copper helps us hold on to magnesium and salt, and because copper also helps to build collagen throughout the body, copper helps greatly with hydration. A lot of people are having dehydration problems. And copper seems to fix that. I used to need to have water all the time while I was working out. In between every set, it was a guaranteed trek to the fountain in between sets. These days I can go and I can work out and do 10 sets, not have any water afterwards at all for even a couple of hours. It's what a dramatic change. It's amazing. The body really holds on to water with some copper. Now, sometimes people in the beginning of fluoride detox will overwhelm their kidneys, and that's a different matter. And they sometimes get edema, which is swelling in the body tissues. That is, again, that happens also with boron and with iodine. People sometimes get their kidneys a little overloaded with fluoride. So the trick there is to either have greens or baking soda with some water, which is like, start with eighth of a teaspoon of baking soda. You can take up to 1 full teaspoon a day for short periods and not throw off all your electrolytes, just to clean out your kidneys. And once you eliminate kidney or lower back pain, once you eliminate the edema, then you can stop doing that. Baking soda is not something to take large amounts of long term. You just want to help clear out the kidneys, and then you can go back to detoxing again. You do that as much as you need to, but just don't overdo it. What else with copper? A lot of people, once they get the fluoride out, they eliminate their brain fog and their brains think better. Copper heals the nerves in at least 20 different ways. Copper restores the myelin sheath. A lot of researchers have said that copper should be great for Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease, because copper just restores the myelin sheath. But really, in my research, I found it helps the nerves in at least 20 different ways. Copper helps make 4 neurotransmitters. It acts as a neurotransmitter itself. It helps the reuptake of neurotransmitters. Again, restores the myelin sheath. Copper is needed for cell wall integrity of the nerves. Copper is needed for ATP in the nerves, and nerves are very, very ATP dependent. Some people say, like, our brains can use up to 25% of the blood sugar in our bodies. The average nerve has only about 500 mitochondria, but some nerve cells can have millions of mitochondria, all making energy, and it needs copper for that energy. Again, cell wall, structural integrity for the DNA, to lengthen telomeres, to reduce aging, all of these things. Quite a few people have had their nerves restored on copper in our group, including myself. I had like a patch of skin on my nose here that from when I got punched when I was a teenager, and so I had no feeling in this area, and it all restored with copper. I also have had on and off peripheral neuropathy in my 2 fingers here, because I had some I had a health condition when I was 18 that required a lot of IV antibiotics, and some of the nerves and maybe some of the arteries collapsed in my arm there, and so I get peripheral neuropathy there. But I look at it as my superpower now. As if I take more copper, it goes away, and if I keep the blood circulation going, it goes away. If I take the B vitamins, it goes away. If I don't take the B vitamins for up to 10 days, then it can come back. As far as the B vitamins go, yes, I have learned in the last year that B6 and B9 are toxic, and I don't think that they are valid, useful vitamins at all. And the reason is that they're so toxic at such low levels, and it doesn't seem like people can take B6 and B9 to actually achieve any positive health outcomes at all. There are no B6 or B9 health groups on Facebook. There's nobody who rave about them. Usually the people who take them are people who already have existing massive brain issues, and our entire medical establishment is really about prescribing brain toxins to people with brain conditions. People with depression, they give them toxins, and then their brains slow down, and then people are like, oh, I'm finally calm. That's not how things should work. There are alcoholics in the world. It's indisputable that alcohol is a toxin, yet people gravitate to the toxin. Why? Why do people do that? How do they get addicted? Toxins somehow make people feel good. And I think B6 and B9, because they're both associated with nerve damage at very low levels, it's just flat out better to view them as metabolites that are toxic. B9 is toxic at 1 milligram. And B6 can be toxic as little as 10 milligrams. That's the upper limit now established in the UK. Again, why take B vitamins that are established as toxins? By the establishment, the NIH, the government data indicates that B9 is toxic at 1 milligram because, let's see, women's babies have more neurological damage if they take over 1 milligram. Older people have more neurodegeneration over 1 milligram. There's about 5 different studies showing that B9 is toxic if you take it over 1 milligram. So that's conclusive enough evidence for me. And then the only people who get any benefit from it are usually people who have already suffered some kind of nerve damage, and then they feel a little bit of relaxation and relief, which also goes to show it's probably a toxin. One of the things I discovered when I started taking more copper is the brain works better. So you're thinking more. It's hard to turn the brain off. This is not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to get used to it. So, toxins, what they do is they slow the brain down. Again, I'm niacin flushing. So niacin acts slightly counter to copper, and I thought my brain would be a little bit more on point, but I feel a little bit relaxed today, a little bit more relaxed than I otherwise would be. I'm finding my memory is not quite as good, as sharp as I would want it to be. So I'm trying to figure out where I'm at in the conversation here. Flushing. So my skin feels like it's beginning to crawl. It feels like I'm just hot, right? Like I'm in the sun, burning. It's a little bit of a distraction. Niacin has a calming effect, and I don't like that because I would rather have my brain be more on point. I feel like I'm stuck mentally from the niacin flush. Let's see. What should I talk about next? How much copper do you get from drinking out of a copper cup? It's hard to get the answer to that question. I've only found one answer, and I haven't been able to corroborate it, but it seems as if it's only about 0.4 milligrams, but it could be highly variable. It's an ancient practice. It doesn't seem to add much, but when I first started the practice, it felt as if drinking out of a copper cup would give me a little bit of a heartburn. So it requires a little bit of adjusting to. My wife enjoyed it at first, and then after a while, she didn't like it. So I'll have to encourage her to do it a little bit more. I gravitate towards it, and then I give it up for a while. But these days, I clean my copper cup with salt and vinegar about once a week, and it keeps it fairly clean. What next? I wrote an article saying I don't know if I really trust niacin all that much because of the fact that it appears that it could block copper. But I've also gone and tried to determine how little niacin I can get away with taking. And if I don't take niacin on my high copper program, after about 3 weeks, I get a little bit of a rash right around the neck. And that rash around the neck, there's a name for it, it's called pellagra, and it's niacin deficiency. So while niacin may block copper, high copper can also conversely block niacin. So I've discovered that even though I don't like taking the niacin, I have to take some if I'm taking the high copper. So that kind of explains why I take the B vitamins about every 2 or 3 days. Sometimes I can go about a week, but about every 2 or 3 days is good. The other reason to take the B vitamins about every 2 to 3 days is that when you take the B vitamins individually, like you have to if you want to avoid B6 and B9, very often you're getting them in very large amounts. So your typical B complex has about 50 milligrams of B2, 50 milligrams of B1, 50 milligrams of B3. But when you're buying them in separate bottles, you can get, 100 milligrams of B1, 500 milligrams of B2, 500 milligrams of, in other words, they're often 10 times the amount. So if you're taking 10 times the amount, as in a B complex, you don't need to take them every day. Every third day is fine. Now they say that the B vitamins are all water soluble. That is not the case with the neurotoxic B6. They have said that one can take up to a year to detoxify from, and it's been about a year for me. The other point that people miss when I talk negatively about B6 and B9, they'll say, well, it's needed for this. Nobody can avoid B6 and B9. Every single food that's out there has B6 and B9 in it. So you can't avoid it. So if you can't avoid it, where's the deficiency? And if there's no deficiency, why supplement? We don't need to supplement B6 and B9 if they're everywhere. With regards to B6, we're getting at least 1 milligram in our diets, which should be plenty. And with regards to B9, because it's fortified in the food supply, most people get half a milligram. And 1 milligram is toxic. So you really want to avoid supplementing B9, because if you're already getting half a milligram and then you supplement another half milligram, you're going to be right at the toxic level. And there are a lot of supplements that are at 0.8 milligrams. So if you're already getting 500 and then you add 0.8, you're getting 1.3 milligrams, which is over the toxic level for B9. So B9 should never be supplemented. Otherwise, you're just more likely to have children with brain damage. And what do we see out in America? We have 1 in 6 kids now have neurological problems for a wide array of toxins in the environment. We just don't need to add any extra toxins. So no B6 and no B9. When you look at all this and you put it all together, you see that the government is not very good at giving us good health advice. And they're still putting fluoride in the water. That's also a trouble. The government talks against iodine. And yet they say nobody should take more than 1 milligram of iodine because that can be dangerous. But in the event of a nuclear attack, you should take 130 milligrams of niacin, and that is safe and effective. Well, wait a second here. Do you hear what they just said? Don't take more than 1 milligram of iodine because it's dangerous. But in the event of a nuclear attack, take 130 milligrams. That is safe and effective. They're lying. They can't have it both ways. Iodine is safe and effective, and my wife and I, we took 2,000 milligrams of iodine every day for a year. We're just fine. The research says that historically people took 3,000 milligrams of iodine, and it cured all sorts of thyroid problems in double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. People would take 9 grams of iodine, which is 9,000 milligrams, for short periods when they were sick. Iodine is super safe. What we discovered is that after a year, we probably were a little bit low on calcium and copper. And so we finally stopped that. And right now, we have shifted away from Lugol's, and we're taking only supersaturated potassium iodine. And the reason why is that in some of the original studies, people actually had fewer detoxification reactions and better overall health outcomes just from fully saturated potassium iodide. So that's encouraging. Whew. The niacin flush is beginning to calm down. What more can I say about copper? Should be taken in balance with zinc. I covered that. There just are an enormous amount of healing testimonials over on our Facebook group at the Copper Revolution. Look it up. There's 20,000 people who have joined that group in the last year since the book came out, The Copper Revolution. My book is 500 pages. It's loaded with references. I strongly recommend you get it. Thank you for tuning in today. I think I'm going to call it quits. All right. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.